everyone, it's Daria. Welcome back to my channel FullofLit, and today I'm going to be telling you all about the books that I read in the month of January. The first book that I read was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. For those of you who have never heard of this book, and I imagine there may be 2 of you in the world who haven't, it tells the story of the Greek hero Achilles and his friendship and eventual romantic relationship with Patroclus. It's mainly told in Patroclus's perspective, and it incorporates a lot of Greek mythology and also follows the years of the Trojan War. After having finished this book, I couldn't help but think about the Troy movie from 2004, the one with Brad Pitt and Eric Bana and Orlando Bloom. I love how I can just rattle off all of their names. I remember them very well. And there's a part in the movie and in this book, and I imagine in the actual myth itself, where, you know, first of all, centuries upon centuries of spoilers are headed your way right now. Patroclus dies, and that is kind of the incentive that Achilles needs to finish the war and kill Hector. And then I remembered that in the movie Troy, they made Patroclus Achilles' cousin. So he basically just got really mad when his cousin died, and I remember when I first saw the movie, I was like, it's just your cousin. Like, I know that you love him, but like, that's just your cousin. And now that I've read this book, I get it. 2004 Troy no-homoed so hard that they made Patroclus Achilles' canonical lover, his cousin. So, do with that what you will. The book was phenomenal, and what particularly stood out to me was the writing style and the characterization of Achilles and Patroclus. Patroclus himself is not the standard of a Greek hero. He and the reader are made painfully aware of that from the start, and I really enjoyed that because we get to see Achilles and his heroics and the pride that comes with that from Patroclus's perspective. There was a point in the book where both you as the reader and Patroclus are questioning whether we should continue to look at Achilles through these rose-tinted glasses. For so long, it seems like Achilles can do no wrong. He's the perfect man, the perfect hero. And then we come face to face with his flaws, which is that his own pride to him is more important than the greater good of others, and even the greater good of people who he loves and his friends. The thing about Madeline Miller's writing style is that it's transportive. You get sucked into the story, into the scenario that is playing out, and it just doesn't let you go. There are books that you read and you enjoy, and then there are books that consume your every waking moment, and you're just waiting for the time that you can go back and pick it up again, and that is what happened to me with this book. The next books I'm going to be talking about I read during the Smutathon. I'm going to link my vlog for that readathon in the description below in case you want to watch it and see my more in-depth thoughts about these books. First, I read Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. This book was just the definition of a romp. It was fun, it was quick. This book follows Misha and Ryan, who have been pen pals ever since they were young, and one night they end up meeting, but Misha is the only one who recognizes the other person. Time goes on, and Misha stops writing to Ryan, and she starts to wonder whether she did something wrong, and then one day, this mysterious guy shows up at her school. Of course, we know that this guy is Misha, but she doesn't quite figure that out for a long time. Misha and Ryan's relationship is incredibly combative. Misha is holding on to this anger and resentment towards Ryan because she's not the kind of person that she always portrayed herself to be in her letters. And Ryan is dealing with this seemingly random stranger who is being mean to her, who dislikes her for some reason. The relationship between them can definitely be deemed problematic. The things that they say and do to one another, the ways that they try to humiliate each other, to be honest with you. They're definitely not going to be winning gold medals in any relationship Olympics. I think one thing that I definitely appreciated about this book was Ryan and the way that her storyline, her individual one, was handled. She's not really a good person when we meet her. She's very cowardly. She just wants to be popular and have people like her. And in order to achieve that goal, she lets her friends get away with a lot of really terrible things and even participates in them herself. Getting to see her move away from that and start to become the person she actually wanted to be instead of just going along with this facade, I thought that was really interesting to read about. Like I mentioned, I totally understand how this book could be deemed problematic by some people. It really is just subjective. It depends on your threshold and your standards for what you want in your literature and what you can handle in your romance. The next book that I read was Wolf Song by TJ Klune, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This book follows Ox, who lives a pretty solitary existence siblings. He is raised by a single mother. His father walked out on the both of them when he was very young. The only friends he has are the guys that he works with at an auto shop after school. But that all changes when he gets to know the family that moves in down the street and befriends the youngest of the group, Joe. I don't imagine I'm going to be spoiling any of you when I tell you that the family are werewolves. Like, look at the cover, their paws. This book is about wolves, okay? The thing that was done so well with this book was the relationships between all the pack members. And anytime anything was going on, whether it was the most mundane everyday activities or they were battling against some evil force, it always came back to the bonds between the pack and the family members and the love and the loyalty that they had for one another. Halfway through the book, there's a major decision that is made that basically shifts the entire narrative and shifts everyone's relationships with one another, particularly the main romantic relationship between Joe and Ox. And it created the most amazing angst between the two of them. Like I mentioned with Patroclus before, there is something to be said about following a main character who does not fit the stereotypical mold of a hero. Ox struggles with crippling insecurity and self-doubt throughout the entire novel, and getting to see him work through those emotions to land in the place that he does at the end of this book, which I do not want to spoil for you. It was just one of the most well-written and satisfying character arcs that I've ever read about. In short, this book is basically Twilight if Twilight had been about the werewolves and all the werewolves had been gay. So read it. The next book that I read was Marriage for One by Ella Mays, and I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. This book follows Jack and Rose, and honestly, I feel like I should just end the synopsis there, because once you name your characters Jack and Rose, I feel like you're inevitably setting them up for failure. And while these two managed to get a much happier ending than the original Jack and Rose, I must say that their relationship was a failure, given the fact that I did not really care about it. At the very start of this novel, Jack proposes marriage to Rose because her grandfather left her a very lucrative property that she wants to use, but the property is left to her future husband. She was engaged to somebody when her grandfather wrote that will, but now no longer is. So Jack says, hey, I'll marry you, I'll get the property, you can use it to create the coffee house of your dreams, and then after 2 years, we'll just dissolve this whole thing. And then of course, they develop feelings for one another, they really fall in love, blah, 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 blah. I didn't care. For some reason, I couldn't connect to Jack and Rose. Honestly, sometimes Jack would really bug me with his aloofness and inability to express his emotions. Like, I know that that's a very stereotypical thing in a lot of romance novels. You've got the broody guy who just doesn't want to open up, but then eventually does. And for some reason, it bugged me so much in this book. Don't ask me why, but it just did. The plot was interesting enough, I guess, but honestly, pretty standard, and by that I mean pretty forgettable. To summarize, it was fun while it lasted, and I haven't thought about it since. Next, I read The Guy on the Right by Kate Stewart, and I gave this 2.5 out of 5 stars. I had such expectations and such high hopes for this book, and none of it came to fruition, and I was deeply disappointed. This book follows Theo, who has always felt like a supporting character in his life, especially when compared to his popular Adonis-like leading man of a roommate. He meets this girl Lainey and they strike up a friendship, and then they start to develop feelings and obviously fall in love and all that jazz. Let's talk about the things that went wrong with this book. First of all, it was very hard for me to actually pay attention. You know when you're just passively absorbing a story, you're not really paying attention to it, and suddenly you're 5 chapters in, you have no idea how you got there or what's happening? That was happening to me constantly with this book. So that was the first star docked right there. I also found that I just didn't particularly like Lainey or Theo. Like, neither one had any characteristics that were compelling, that were relatable, that I could be entertained by. So that's about a half star docked right there. They started to become more interesting when they actually got together, but it really sucked that I couldn't actually enjoy the build-up between them, because that's really the juicy part of the romance, when you're just waiting for the main 2 characters to get together. And I found that I was not invested in that. And then this book got docked another star because of this very uncomfortable scene that was written to this book for no reason. I don't know why it was there. I don't know what the author was thinking. Ugh. Basically, there's a Halloween party and Lainey, a white woman, dresses up as Medea from the Medea movie franchise. And the entire night, she is imitating this character. It's very uncomfortable, very weird. Honestly, I almost gave up on the book right there, but I was really deep into it and I wanted to see what the hell else was gonna happen. I probably should have just given up. Honestly, I'm trying to trust my gut more often now. I used to be the kind of person who had an aversion to DNFing. Like, even when I basically DNF'd books, like I put it away, I wouldn't actually say that I DNF'd left it. I would delude myself into thinking that I would go back and start it again, and that never happened. So I'm trying to make a conscious effort. If I don't like a book, if something happens that I'm not into, if I find that I'm struggling, I'm just going to leave it alone. I should have done that with this book and I didn't. My mistake. So I learned from my mistake with the guy on the right, and when it comes to this next book, I actually did DNF it when I was not enjoying it. And that book was Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy by Cassandra Clare and numerous other authors. I decided to read this book because I wanted to get to know all of the characters that are going to be showing up in Chain of Gold, and I know that they make their first appearances in this anthology. I can't tell you what went wrong with this book. I just know that I was not in the mood to read it. I only made it an hour and a half into the audiobook, and every single time I tried to start it again and read more, listen to more, I physically couldn't do it. I would exit out of the audiobook and read something else, or I would watch Netflix or listen to music. So I decided I wasn't going to force myself. As much as I would love to read about the Chain of Gold characters, I can always go read their wiki pages online. I know maybe that's like a blasphemous thing to say, but you know what? Fuck it, I'm just gonna do it. I'm not gonna continue to lie to myself and say that I'm going to read Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy and then that Ghost Market, whatever. Like, I'm not gonna do it, okay? I'm not. I already know what I need to know, which is that I love Cordelia. That's it. I don't need to know anything else about Chain of Gold. The next book that I read was Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. This book is told in alternating POVs between Amira and this girl, Alex? Still don't know how to pronounce it. So Amira is the babysitter for Alix's young 2-year-old daughter. So one night, Alix calls Amira up while Amira is out with her friends. She says, can you please take my daughter to like a grocery store or someplace because there's been a break-in in the house and we just don't want her here to see it. So that's exactly what Amira does. This woman at the grocery store sees Amira, a black woman with this white child, and calls the police or the security of the grocery store on her. And then the entire incident gets filmed, and that is kind of where the plot begins. This book was very much a deconstruction of white liberalism. And what I mean by that is that the author was showing that these liberal white people are just as responsible for perpetuating racism, discrimination, prejudice as anybody else. The way that Alix treated Amira, the way that she thought about Amira, it was obsessive. There's no other way for me to describe it. It was like Alix needed Amira's friendship and some kind of approval from her, that she liked Alix as a person, for Alix to feel comfortable with herself. And it was honestly sometimes just laughable and very uncomfortable the way that Alix needed Amira to reassure her through her friendship that Alix was not a racist or a bad person. In the novel, Amira also ends up dating a man who has a past connection with Alix. The novel and the characters dissect and talk about whether or not this guy has a fetish for black women. Alix and Amira's boyfriend are constantly trying to pull Amira this way or that and convince her that the other person is bad and racist and you shouldn't even associate with them. I'm the good person. Me, choose me. And what I really liked is that the novel acknowledged that both of them are trying to use Amira in their own way. The next book that I read was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars, and this was honestly just like a transformative read for me. This book is one long letter from the author to his mother. This book is not linear, it's not chronological, it jumps from place to place, from time to time, from emotion to emotion. It talks about the relationship between a mother and son, it talks about trauma, it talks about war and what it means to be an immigrant, what it means to be the child of immigrants. It deals with sexuality and repression and expression. If you do end up picking this book up, I highly recommend that you listen to it on audio. The author reads it himself and it is just absolutely amazing. This is the kind of book where there's not anything I can say to really do it justice, to tell you what it's about, to tell you how it made me feel. Like it feels impossible. That might sound cliche, it might sound dumb, but you know what? That's how this story made me feel. And yeah, you should read it. You should definitely read it. The next 2 books I read for my university classes, the first was Yvain or The Night with the Lion by Chrétien de Troyes. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I'm a huge fan of Arthurian romances and medieval stories. The story follows Yvain, who is part of King Arthur's court of knights. Certain events lead to his marriage to a beautiful woman, and fairly soon into their marriage, he gets whisked away to this tournament. His wife makes him promise that he will come back in exactly 1 year. He says of course, and then promptly breaks that promise, and then basically just goes mad and runs into the woods and lives there and goes through a bunch of shenanigans and adventures. The story was fun and entertaining. It dragged a little bit there towards the end. Overall, I enjoyed it, and I must say that there's something so hilarious about the fact that this dude enjoyed jousting so much that he basically forgot he had a wife for like 3 years. And finally, I read the complete writings of Phyllis Wheatley. I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. This book is basically a collection of poetry written by Phyllis Wheatley, who was an enslaved Black woman. A vast majority of her poetry was actually elegies to the dead, and they all sort of followed the same formula, and because of that, it could get a little bit repetitive. I'm not a huge fan of poetry of any kind, but I have to say one of the interesting things about reading Phyllis Wheatley's poetry is getting to see the way that she talks about enslavement, the way that she discusses the sort of brewing feelings of revolution within the colonies. A lot of colonists at the time would basically say that they were slaves to the British Empire, and it was interesting to see Phyllis Wheatley talk about that and critique it. So there you have it, all the books that I read in the month of January. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and also let me know what you read this month. As always, my social media links are in the description below, so check those out if you would like, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! Thank you.